Making sure the audio is on. I can't hear it yet. Maybe you can. If you can, this is Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. And we're about to go live. A short live broadcast. There we go. I believe we're live now. Let me just get some audio feedback here. Let me adjust the mic. Testing the microphone. Is it plugged in correctly? Yes. Yes, it is. Okay. It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Welcome to this live broadcast. Somebody says, WTF, Skyrim is the best. False. Morrowind is the best Elder Scrolls game, followed by Oblivion, and then Daggerfall, and then Arena, and then Skyrim comes in number 5. It's called Elder Scrolls V, the 5th best or the worst of the canonical titles in the Elder Scrolls series. Them's fighting words. Do you want to fight over it? Come fight me. I will fight you over it. Yeah. And you will lose and you will still be wrong. Somebody, Commander Gotus Gallstone says the setting is way better than the others. False. The setting of Morrowind is far superior than Skyrim. The setting of Skyrim is generic. William Brennan says, you'd rather play the Elder Scrolls Arena than Skyrim. Yes. In my very first playthrough of Skyrim, I saw everything there was to see. I did everything there was to do. And it was fairly bland. There's still content in Arena all of these years later that I haven't even touched. Kaido Loveboat says, if it has lots of goofy mods, yeah, if you turn it into a different game, it will be a different game, of course. That's true of every game. MYH10 says, is anyone here actually old enough to have played Arena? Right here? I'm ancient in video game years, and I started with Daggerfall. The first Elder Scrolls game I played was Morrowind. That's the first time I heard of the series, and then I was like, man, I've got to figure out what Elder Scrolls 2 and 1 were about. So I looked those up, and I enjoyed those games. There's a learning curve, especially if you're used to modern game controls. Because the controls are, people might call them clunky now, but for, back then, those early games were quite fascinating. Anyway, if you want to talk about Elder Scrolls the whole time, that's cool. Otherwise, we can talk about anything you want here. Again, this is going to be a short live stream. I've been dealing with a cold for quite a while now, and it's been affecting my throat here. So I don't know how long I will be able to keep this up. Cinephile Alec Walker says, when it said Ramsey Dewey, I thought that reality had glitched a second, because in my mind, you're like the philosophical MMA BJJ guy. Sure, I do all of those things. I got a comment today from a guy who commented on one of my boxing technique videos and said, this guy does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Don't take boxing advice from him. And I just laughed. I was like, dude. And he said, stay in your lane, bro. We are not cars. We are not vehicles on a two-way road. We are human beings. I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This is true. And I practice many other martial arts as well. I've spent more time boxing than this guy has spent alive on this planet, who is telling me to stay in my lane. I have coached a WBA boxing champion among other professionals and amateurs in the sport of boxing. I've spent many years as a boxing coach. It's one of the things I do. Anyway, I do a lot of things. My primary thing, mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts. The sport of MMA, but that's not it. And believe it or not, people can like video games who aren't professional gamers. It's weird that professional gaming is a thing now. When I was a kid, children of my generation were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we would say things like, I want to be a fireman or a policeman or go join the army or whatever kids were supposed to say back then. But deep down in our hearts, we were thinking, man, I wish professional gamer was a real thing. And if anybody dared to say that, they would, of course, be met with, ha ha, little Billy, that's a stupid thing to say. That will never happen. And yet, professional gamers exist now. It's bizarre. We live in backwards world now. Not the type of conversation you ever thought I'd heard. Do you watch this channel? I mean, I know I've got thousands of videos and you haven't seen all of them, but we've discussed this. I've made Skyrim parodies on this channel. It's come up a bunch of times. So the fact that this is blowing your mind that I've mentioned Elder Scrolls on this channel is kind of shocking to me. Tobias says, you should stay on your plane of Mundus and leave Skyrim alone. Skyrim belongs to the Z-gamers. The world of Nirn is much more diverse than Skyrim, friends. Much more diverse than just Skyrim. And I stick to my guns. Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind was the best Elder Scrolls game by far. Oh man, there's a lot of Zelda discussion going on here. So, I played the original Legend of Zelda. Played that one a lot. I played Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, you know, the old NES sprite-based games. I never made it all the way through Zelda A Link to the Past because I never owned that game. I had a Super Nintendo when I was a teenager, but I didn't own Zelda A Link to the Past. I rented it from the video store, and I never finished it because of the time constraints. And that was the last Zelda game I played until fairly recently. And I tried out the most recent Zelda game. What's that one called? The one on the Nintendo Switch? And it's a way different game. You know, the one where you can make your own weapons and they all break after like 30 seconds. and it's I don't know, man. It's kind of hard to get used to that. I enjoyed the previous Elder Scrolls game mechanics before Skyrim, where the weapons and the armor would degrade at kind of a natural sort of pace. If you get into like 6 sword fights in a row, then of course your sword is going to degrade and need repairs. You're going to have to sharpen that thing. But the modern Zelda games where your weapons break after like 5 or 6 swings it's weird, man. Yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, that's the one. That's the one. Finally, somebody agrees with me. Zarko says, I agree with you 100%. Skyrim was the weakest game on its own, only saved by mods. Yeah, Skyrim was kind of a fun little sandbox for modders. But as a vanilla game, man, weak. Weak, man. They nerfed so much of it. The graphics improved a bit, marginally, over the previous entry. Not even a lot, marginally. And the combat system improved marginally. Everything else was meh. Let's be honest. It's a game that they streamlined for the lowest common denominator, which is probably why it became so popular. Because people tend to gravitate toward what is easy rather than what is rewarding. All right, Khajiit Karo gets it. Dagoth is by far the best antagonist of the Elder Scrolls series. This is true. This is objectively and subjectively true. Man, you can't have a great story without a great antagonist, and Dagoth-Ur was such a great antagonist. And you don't see him until the end of the game. But the build-up, the story, the fact that he's ever present in your mind from the beginning of the game, and you don't even know who he is yet, but that threat of Dagoth-Ur is always there. It's masterful storytelling in The Elder Scrolls 3. Sweet, we got a super chat from Yadid Chowdhury, who says, "Hey Coach, hope you're doing well. Please give us your most controversial, spicy, and downright absolutely criminal gaming hot take." Okay. E.T. for the Atari 2600 was a good game, and I loved it. Yeah, I know. Back in the early days of YouTube, there were a handful of YouTube videos, which was a lot back then, but like we're talking like 6, 7, 8 of them, saying E.T. is the worst video game ever and it caused a gaming crash and almost destroyed the video game industry, blah, 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 blah. No, E.T. was a phenomenal game that set the standard, the industry standard that many games followed. Think about it. It was the first home console game that had sprites with multiple colors. As many as 3 different colors. That was phenomenal, a phenomenal leap technologically in the days of the Atari 2600 where the sprites had a single color. The sprite of Elliot had I think 4. It's crazy, man. And it was the first, not the first, I think the first game to have multiple screens, because games didn't scroll back then like they do today, but multiple screens was a game called Adventure. It was an RPG. And E.T. expanded on that idea to a great degree. And without games like that, like E.T. and Adventure, which most of you kids probably forgot, we wouldn't have Zelda. The original Legend of Zelda used the same mechanic, the same exact one. They borrowed a lot from those early Atari games, man. So E.T. was a great game. That's my hot take. Yeah, I know. The first video game I played was Pac-Man. Played it in arcades back in the early 80s when I was a kid. Yeah. Pac-Man, first video game I played. No, wait. Actually, I'm not sure if it was Pac-Man or Pong. The first video game I remember playing was Pac-Man. But yeah, when I was a kid and my dad was still around, he used to take me and my older brother to video arcades. And so I spent a lot of my early childhood in video arcades. Back when those were brand new, man. The golden age of video games, really. How many of you remember video arcades back when those were a thing? Man, like even in a small, rural farming community that I grew up in, we had a video arcade. A place called Packy's. With Pac-Man up on the side, some beautiful artwork outside, with Pac-Man eating some ghost monsters. It was like dark inside, illuminated only by the screens of the arcade machines. Oh man, those places were great. And yeah, man, people would crowd around and watch you play if you were any good. Fun times, man. And then there was a nickel arcade opened up, man. I remember I loved arcades, but the fact that it cost 25 cents to play a game back then, which was a lot of money back in the early 80s when minimum wage was like, I don't know, 17 cents an hour or something crazy like that. And you're probably thinking, no, actually it was more. Look, if you were a kid and you were working on a farm, you were lucky to make 17 cents an hour. So the fact that a video game cost 25 cents to play, oh man, that was a lot. That was a lot, man. So in a nickelcade, a nickel arcade opened up. Oh boy, that was a massive upgrade to the average kid. So I got a question. This is a MMA related question. I'm going to read it. Got this one on an Instagram post that I posted with an old picture. I was like 22 years old. I had my beard and my hair were growing out a little bit. This was one of the last pictures taken before my hair was all gone and my glorious scalp completely revealed. This came from Slash Bash, who said, "I'm just 21, coach. I'm trying to make it as a fighter. Besides just the fighting, training, and dieting aspect, is there anything you'd recommend for staying on the course? It's been really hard with people telling me that I can't, that it doesn't pay the bills, as if my life is only to benefit them or keep whatever they got going. Like what brings my life meaning just isn't important whatsoever. It is one thing to give words of wisdom, to try to help, but that's not what I get from them. Of course, at the end of the day, I'm going to push forward no matter what's going through my mind. But as it stands, it's reasonless to not at least ask someone with the life experience that I desire, what is the best course of action?" The best course of action. That's something that every coach spends their entire career trying to figure out. What is the best course of action? We observe patterns of success. We try to repeat them. So it sounds like you've got some individuals in your personal life who are holding you back. At least that's how it feels. Maybe they're concerned. Sounds like maybe they're friends or family. Understandable. Maybe it's your mom. Maybe it's your significant other. I don't know. But people who love us, when they hear, "I want to spend my life cage fighting," they often think, well, that sounds like a terrible idea. And it might be a terrible idea, but sounds like you're serious about it. So we might as well make the best of it. Xontier says, "Go for the glory, bro. Test yourself. It's not about their perception. Do what fulfills you. If it's not sinful, I don't believe two people testing themselves in combat to be sinful." Okay. Got some feedback here in the comments. The best course of action. How can I give you a novel answer to this? Good question. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go coach a fighter I've just started working with. She's a Chinese fighter with a very good wrestling base. She's had 2 professional fights. Did really well in my estimation. She should have been awarded the decision in her first fight, but was not. And she and I had a conversation the other day. She's kind of at an impasse. She wants to succeed, wants to be wildly successful in MMA, but again has a bunch of dissenting voices, just like our friend who asked this question did. Like, hey man, it's not a ladylike thing to do. You've got other stuff. You've lost your first 2 fights. Give it up. And we're talking about a very promising talent here. Very, very promising talent. And that's one of the problems with fighting, is that only 50% of the people win, period. And 50% of the people lose, no matter how talented, no matter how good. And people who are not involved in that fight, when they see a loss, and not just your loss, but losses in general, the fact that losses can and do happen, they are going to turn up their noses and say no. How many times have you seen a fighter in any combat sport lose a fight, and then all of the fans, all of the casuals will say, "Oh, he's a bum. He lost a fight." This could be a world-class talent, a top 10 guy, and suddenly he's a bum. Do you remember Li Jingliang? his fight against Chimaev, Khamzat Chimaev. And Chimaev finished Lee very quickly. He looked levels above the Chinese fighter. And the next day, check the internet's comments sections, and what happens? People are saying, oh, Li Jingliang, what a bum. He lost in like half a minute. Boo. He should retire. And Li Jingliang at that point was he was in the top 10 ranked welterweights in the UFC. A top 10 guy who earned that spot the hard way. And people are saying he's a bum. He's a nobody because he lost a fight to a very, very talented fighter. Yeah, people are terrible at judging, especially people who are not involved in the process. So you're going to hear dissenting voices right now before you get your start. You're going to hear dissenting voices during the training process. You're going to hear dissenting voices every step of the way. When you get in the cage to fight, you will still hear the dissenting voices if you allow yourself to. When I started fighting, my first few professional fights, kickboxing matches, before I got into MMA, I heard the boos and the jeers of the crowd. I heard the idiots, the drunk fools shouting, "What a bum, if I was in there I'd punch him in the face, boo, you suck." And every iteration of that, with the colorful French metaphors to go along with it. That's a fancy way of saying they were saying nasty swear words. And I didn't know any better at the time, so I absorbed that, and it affected me. I allowed it to affect me. And it affected my performance. As soon as you start thinking about yourself, and this isn't just in fighting, this is in life. As soon as you start thinking about yourself, you're setting yourself up for failure. When you start telling yourself, I'm the main character in this story. When you start telling yourself, oh, all of these things that other people are saying are hurting my feelings, I'm so offended, you're setting yourself up for failure. If you start telling yourself, I matter more than anyone else, you're setting yourself up for failure. Stop focusing on yourself. Martial artists often talk about the Zen concept, Mushin in Japanese, without heart, or without thought, without mind. Okay? And people interpret that a bunch of ways. But right now, one way to apply that is forget yourself and go to work. That's fight advice, and that's life advice for you. We have a question from Gray MMA, who says, why do you think Muay Thai isn't as popular as Western kickboxing, glory, etc., and boxing? Is it too brutal? I don't think it's the brutality aspect of it. It's the marketing aspect. Muay Thai in Thailand is obviously very popular. It's the Thai national sport. Thai people grow up with it. It's culturally theirs. They relate to it. They associate with it. A lot of Westerners who watch Muay Thai for the first time, for the second time, for the 100th time, think it's pretty cool, and they wish it was more available. They wish that it played on TV in the West on a regular basis, but it doesn't. Western kickboxing shows glory, for example. Well, they're better at marketing to Western audiences. And Some Muay Thai organizations like Rajadamnern Stadium, for example, in Bangkok, they've made attempts to try to westernize more. They got rid of like all the traditional music and the Waikru Ram Muay. They've got like pop music playing when the fighters walk out now. It's a very modern looking stadium. They try to make it look more like a Western kickboxing fight. That's kind of a shame, though, that they're pandering more to Western audiences. They're in Thailand. Especially since I think a lot of Western tourists who go to Thailand, they want to have the authentic experience. They want to hear the hornpipes and the drums playing the whole time. They want to see them do their Muay Thai dance, the Waikru Ram Muay. They want to see them wear the headdress when they walk out. Because when you're a tourist, you want to have that special, authentic, foreign experience. But if you're watching it on TV, maybe not as much. You just kind of want to cut to the action. So if you think about it, let's bring this back to Elder Scrolls. Will Speakman says, excuse me. Oh, wait. Elder Scrolls Online is the worst Elder Scrolls game. I haven't played Elder Scrolls Online. Okay, I was looking at a different one. Somebody said, what does this have to do with Elder Scrolls? Okay, look. Skyrim is like, it's like the westernized, modern Rajadamnern Stadium fights, where they just cut straight to the action. It's all action. There's a whole lot less story. It's much less steeped in tradition. And Morrowind is like the traditional, classic, cultural fights with the hornpipes and the drums and the dancing and all that great stuff. If you like one instead of the other, that's okay. Have I played Dark Souls? Yes, I did play Dark Souls for a little bit. Spent maybe about an hour and a half playing that. And before I played it, I heard a lot of hype online. People were saying, oh, Dark Souls is the hardest game ever, man. It's like a throwback to old school gaming. No, it's not. Yes, it's got a high difficulty level, but look. In old school gaming, unlike Dark Souls, there were no unlimited continues. If you died, that was it. You had to start all over again. Old school games were brutal. You want a brutal old school game? Battletoads. Battletoads for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Most people never got past level 3. And if you said I got past level 3, you're probably lying. And if you're not, then you're an absolute video game maven. Do I think Nerevar was murdered by the tribunal? 100% yes. Question from Nathan V, who says, did I see Icy Mike's video on the buckler as a defense mechanism? Yes, I did see that one. I think it makes grips, takedowns, and submissions easier. It fits in the confines of Canada's legal definition of self-defense. Huh. Well, cool, man. Start carrying a buckler with you if that's something that concerns you. A buckler. I'm laughing because I grew up in a small town right next to a rodeo arena. And so rodeo was a big part of the culture I grew up in. And rodeo champs would get a big old belt buckle. And when you said buckler, I started thinking, how would you carry a buckler around if it was a self-defense tool? You'd turn it into a giant belt buckle. Or you could use one of those old-style cowboy rodeo bucklers, or buckles, as a buckler. Just have it detached from your belt. Boom, instant shield. Sweet. Somebody invent that. Some self-defense nerd invent that and then go on a fear-mongering tirade, make people afraid enough to buy it. The Challenger says, Ramsey, what do you think of wrestling in HEMA? Historical European martial arts. Wrestling is a fundamental part of historical European martial arts. If you read any of those old sword fighting codices, especially the German ones, there's a lot of wrestling in there. How many HEMA nerds are good at wrestling? I don't know. A lot of them are not. But many of them are very interested in the topic, so I would love to see more HEMA nerds get more invested in wrestling, because honestly, the technique hasn't changed that much. Wrestling is wrestling. Humans are humans. Now, when you're wrestling with a sword in hand, that's different. When you're wrestling another guy with a sword in hand, that's different. But it's not so wildly different that it's not an insurmountable gap. Can HEMA be applied into MMA? Historical European martial arts is a historical reenactment. Mixed martial arts is a combat sport. Can it be applied? I don't even know how to interpret this question. Mixed martial arts is unarmed combat. Are there aspects of historical European martial arts that delve into the realm of unarmed combat? Yes. Is being a big HEMA nerd going to be wildly advantageous in an MMA fight? Not really. Is getting out there and training going to be wildly advantageous in an MMA fight? Yes. Oh, man. I got to read this one. Keem Reynolds says, you're trying to create an army of country Captain Americas, in reference to my suggestion of using cowboy rodeo belt buckles as bucklers, as a shield. We got a bunch of redneck Captain Americas. I love it. Chatchok says, what do I think about M1 medieval stuff where they wear armor and have MMA fights with blunt swords? As a novelty, it's kind of fun to watch. I've seen events like this, not that specific organization, but events like that live, and they're fun to watch, especially live. But it can be ultimately disappointing if you have your expectations set in the wrong place. Most of these matches are ultimately won by pin, if you will. You've got these blunted weapons and hitting the guy with armor, and so nobody's going to get stabbed or cut or anything like that. So ultimately it turns into mostly an endurance contest, endurance and balance, carrying heavy armor under hot lights, with somebody trying to wear you down, and a lot of these guys are not the best athletes. And so, yeah, it's often like watching turtles get pinned on their backs. But as a fun novelty, yeah, watching these knight fights in armor with blunt swords, it's kind of fun, but that's about it as far as I'm concerned. What separates that, what makes something like boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, all of these things where we actually have body-on-body contact without a layer of armor in between. It's much more visceral, it's much more real. The consequences are obviously much more obvious. I mean, if you're in a suit of armor and somebody's banging a shield against your head, obviously you're going to feel that, you're going to hear it. But to somebody watching, they're going to think, okay, yeah, it's fun to watch, but ultimately, what does that do? Whereas if somebody's getting punched in the face, there's a visceral gut reaction, even to the most casual of casuals of, oh, that must hurt. Noah Votter wants to know spellcasting in Morrowind versus Skyrim. Well, duh, Morrowind had, like, probably one of the best magic systems in Elder Scrolls history, period, man. Skyrim, it's like barely even worth using magic at all. Skyrim had like the worst magic system. It had probably the best magic animations, but man, think about this right now. Right now, movie studios are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make mediocre crap movies, but they're spending massive amounts of money on visual spectacle, thinking that if we make the movie pretty enough, then it's going to be a good movie, and then they send it out with like the worst possible story. I mean, think about the recent Star Wars movies. A lot of people were disappointed with that. I had a conversation about this the other day with a big Star Wars nerd friend of mine, and the conclusion was, you know, I didn't hate the new characters, but I did hate the new story. I hated the direction it went. I hated the fact that they just kind of spat all over the franchise and essentially wrecked the whole thing in order to dovetail in these new characters and basically say, here are your new favorite people. Like, no, we don't know these guys. I mean, they're it's fine to bring in a new character into a franchise, but the way they did it was awful. And can you create your own spells in Skyrim? No, you can't. You cannot, unlike the previous Elder Scrolls games. Yeah. People talking about whether or not Elder Scrolls games are broken or not. They were all broken, dude, and that was the best part. Breaking Elder Scrolls games was the best part. But one of the problems with Skyrim was I figured out how to break it within 5 minutes. Like, it took me literally 5 minutes to figure out how to break the game. And it is the most broken game out of all the Elder Scrolls games by far. Like, it is so breakable. Breaking Morrowind was fun. Breaking Skyrim was disappointing. Nathan V says, did I beat Morrowind? Did I finish the main quest? Yes. Yes, I did. Did you beat Morrowind? My poor old Xbox couldn't handle that game after a while. It cast a freezing spell on it. Yeah, if you're playing the Xbox version, pro tip for original Xbox Morrowind players, if you're still playing it on the Xbox, the more you interact with the world and the more you move stuff around, the slower the game is going to load. So if you want the Xbox version to be to load and not freeze and not crash, don't move objects around in the game, at least as much as you can help it. Okay? If you kill a monster, use the dispose of corpse button on every single one. Otherwise, they'll lie around and slow the game down and lag it and so on. If you drop an object, pick that thing up, stick it in a container, right? So it's not on the open world. If you have a bunch of loot you want to hide, stick it in containers. Anyway, pro tips to stop the Xbox version from crashing. Yes, you can beat the game. You can finish the main quest. This is true in Elder Scrolls 1. It takes a long time. It's kind of complicated. And there's actually more than one way to do it. You know how in Morrowind, if you kill one of the NPCs involved in the main quest, and this is before essential NPCs that were unkillable, if you kill them either on purpose or accidentally, you'll get a little message saying the death of this character has resulted in the string of prophecy being unraveled or something like that. So essentially you won't be able to finish the main quest. False. You can find workarounds. You can find so many workarounds to finish the main quest, even if you kill the essential NPCs. Have I played Starfield? No, I don't have a next-gen game system yet or current game current gen game system, so I haven't played anything current in a while. All right, we've got a martial arts related question from Yordle Rin, who says, "Hey, Ramsey, I have a question. What would you pick in BJJ versus JJJ in MMA street fight?" MMA street fight. Okay, I assume you mean MMA or a street fight. One, don't get into street fights. It's dumb. Just don't. A street fight is two idiots getting mad at each other, arguing, shoving, throwing haymakers, grabbing each other in schoolyard bully headlocks, squeezing, falling on the ground, getting tired, and hoping their friends pull them apart. That's a street fight. It's dumb. Don't do it. JJJ, as in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. My experience with Japanese Jiu-Jitsu schools, those I've trained at and those I've seen, is that the majority of those I have experience with are not very good if your goal is to learn how to fight. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools, even the bad ones, will at the very least do live rolling. So when they grab you in that schoolyard headlock and tumble on the ground in a street fight, at least you'll know what to do there because you've experienced it a bunch of times. So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, dude. Kingbird says, "I'd say Elder Scrolls Redguard is worse than Skyrim, but that's a pretty low bar." I haven't played Redguard. That's one I haven't played, but it's not one of the canonical main titles. It's a spin-off. So, yeah. I don't know if it's any good. Todd Howard gave an interview that I saw where he said it had a special place in his heart, that he learned a lot from it. You know what they say, you don't lose, you learn. So Todd Howard learned from Redguard. He didn't lose. Is boxing and BJJ a good base for MMA? Look, a good base is learn how to fight. Get some live experience. Boxing and jiu-jitsu will give you live experience. You're going to spar in boxing. You're going to roll in jiu-jitsu. You're going to have contact with human bodies who are not cooperating with you. That's all important. What do you mean by good base for MMA? You have to respect that MMA is its own unique sport. Some of the skills from boxing and some of the skills from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu will cross over to MMA, but they are importantly different sports. So Daniel B. says, "This is the best and cheapest combination I've found in the city where I live. What are the downsides of a boxing plus BJJ combination?" I would say the major downside is that neither boxing nor BJJ are MMA. And boxing, or should I say punching in MMA, is importantly different than punching in the sport of boxing, largely because of the threat of the takedown. And grappling in BJJ is importantly different than boxing in MMA, largely because wrestling plays a much, much larger part in mixed martial arts than it does in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Ironically, since Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is 100% grappling and mixed martial arts is not 100% grappling, and yet wrestling plays a significantly larger role in MMA than it does in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Why? Guard pulling? Yeah, not just that. It's not just the guard pullers. Even if everybody in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fought for the takedown, Once it goes to the ground, it stays on the ground. Nobody's fighting to get up. Nobody's fighting to get back on their feet. That's not true in MMA. You take a guy down, he fights for his life to get back up on his feet where he can use his most destructive weapons, his strikes. And holding a man down when he doesn't want to be there is a lot of work, and you've got to be a good wrestler to do it. And that's a skill set that is largely ignored in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We have a super chat from Jean-Tier who says, in an MMA event, 3-year Krav Maga student versus 10-year full contact pillow fighting champion. Light heavyweight fight. What are your odds? Okay, so they're both light heavyweights. MMA event. So MMA rules, I assume the unified rules of MMA, maybe the universal rules of MMA. 3-year Krav Maga student versus 10-year full contact pillow fighting champion. You know what? I'm going to have to do a little bit of research. So let me look up pillow fighting champion. Who is the pillow fighting champion? Because whoever this is might be a badass. We don't know. But we're going to find out. Are the pillow fighting championships real? That's what Google wants to know. The PFC, or the Pillow Fighting Championship, is the world's, let me make this bigger so I can actually read it, is the world's first professional pillow fighting league featuring professional fighters engaging in intense, fast-paced and all-ages friendly combat unrivaled by any other professional sports, entertainment, or fighting organization. So if we are to believe that, the pillow fighter will be more exciting than the Krav Maga practitioner of 3 years. So he may win over the judge's decision, if nothing else. But who is the current pillow fighting champion? Let's see here. Who is the current pillow fighting champion? Oh, there's a Wikipedia entry. All right. Who is the champion? I need to know. Come on. Come on. Come on, internet. Don't fail. Oh, we found it. We found it. Okay. Estela Nunes claimed the women's championship title by defeating Kendall Volker in the final match, while Holly Tillman emerged as the men's division champion. Okay. So I don't know what these guys' weights are. Holly Tillman. Let's look this guy up. We're taking this question seriously. Our man paid good money for an answer to this question, so we're going to take it seriously. Holly Tillman, he is an MMA fighter with, according to Tapology, a professional record of 0 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. But he is a professional MMA fighter. Got some pictures. He got a belt. You know, he looks like he's in good physical shape. And I wouldn't be deceived by the fact that he only has 3 professional fights under his belt, and so far no wins in professional MMA. You might say, well, no wins in pro MMA, this guy must suck. Look, I've seen some really good fighters lose fights. 50% of MMA fighters lose their first fight, man. So let's take a look at Holly Tillman. Maybe see if we can watch one of his MMA fights. So, if this guy's a professional MMA fighter, okay, we found one. Okay. If this guy's a pro MMA fighter, and he actually belongs in professional leagues, I don't know, against the average 3-year Krav Maga practitioner. I don't put a lot of stock in Krav Maga because it sucks, man. And like everything I've ever seen produced by a Krav Maga school is just terrible. Okay, so I'm watching I think it's Holly Tillman's first fight. They exchanged some punches. Sorry, I can't put this up on the screen. His opponent shot in. He pulls guard. He looks like he's working for a head and arm guillotine. He's working to get back up to his feet. His opponent's driving in with the legs, pressing him up against the cage. Okay, Tillman gets a nice reversal. He's back up on his feet. All right. He's a game opponent. Okay. His striking looks kind of janky, but that's to be expected. First MMA fight. Oh, man, he just got taken down. He's eaten some punches. He's trying to escape back mount. Hand fighting. He's trying to punch his way out of back mount there. Okay. He's fighting off a rear naked choke. It's not looking good for Tillman in his first foray into professional mixed martial arts. I can see some places he definitely needs to improve, but not the worst first fight I've ever seen. So, won't take the time to watch his other two fights here, but, you know, I'd take Holly Tillman against a 3-year Krav Maga practitioner. Why? Because he has experience, he's done the thing, he's done MMA, and he is the world pillow fighting champion. So, there you go. There you go. We had to research that question. Because that's what we do. That's what we do. We don't just throw out random opinions without the facts to back them up. Yes, as John Tier says, Krav Maga guy is getting mauled by the PFC bear. Exactly. So shout out to Holly Tillman, the PFC World Pillow Fighting Champion. Okay. I think I'll take a couple more questions and then head out, because I got a big day tomorrow. I think some of you write these questions just because you want to hear me say them in my voice. I'm going to read this one just because it's a funny question. Videos for stuff, probably mostly unlisted, says, if you taught a goose MMA, do you think it could fight a tapir? I don't think I could teach a goose MMA. You ever seen those? Those are vicious, man. Vicious little feathered dinosaurs. You get close to a goose, what does it do? It goes... I think a tapir would run away just from that. You wouldn't even have to teach it, man. Those things are freaky, terrifying little birds. We have Scott McGregor, who just sent in a super chat, who says, facts, ? This is the internet. We don't need no facts. That seems to be the mode of operations around these parts. Carly says, is it possible for a human to take an action that is random? I think that by definition it is not. Actions require intent, and anything done without intent cannot be a random action. Is there anything random at all? Delving into the philosophical realm there. We have a super chat from RRTNZ who says, if you had to fight Batman in an MMA match, no gadgets, what would be your strategy to A, win, or B, survive with minimal injuries? Well, if the animated Batman films are any indications of his skill, his arm bars suck. And his setups suck. And yeah, I know it's just a cartoon. But if that's what we're going by, my grappling is objectively better than Batman's by leaps and bounds, levels above. Batman, you're going down. I'm going to choke him out in round 1. We don't even have to talk about surviving with minimal injuries. Batman is the one who has to survive with minimal injuries. There you go. But if we're talking about Batman canonically as the world's greatest hand-to-hand combatant, a guy who can single-handedly defeat multiple opponents who are skilled in martial arts, a guy who, on paper, should be able to win every UFC fight ever against the entire UFC roster, theoretically at once. How do we deal with that guy? Well, how does he do it? Well, if we look at the source material, comic books, video games, animated films, live-action films, he punches and he kicks. And yeah. So how do you deal with somebody who punches and kicks really well? You become an expert counter striker. Ever seen Batman deal with a check hook? I haven't. Batman's going down to a left hook in round 1. Just gotta say. And you might be saying, Ramsey, it sounds like you have a very high opinion of yourself. Look, if you want to win a fight, you have to be confident in the fact that you are going to win. If you tell yourself, oh no, my opponent is up on this giant pedestal, he's literally Batman. What will I do? How will I survive with minimal injuries? You're gonna lose. You've already lost. You've already made up your mind that you've lost. Don't do that. Not smart. We have a super chat from Hendrik, the heterosexual something or other. That is a screen name that is so long the screen won't even print it all out. Who says, how many Ngannous can beat a gorilla? Okay, at first I thought he said, can Ngannou beat a gorilla? To which I was going to say no. And that would be a disappointing answer to that super chat question. But how many Ngannous could beat a gorilla? So gorillas are very powerful animals, very dangerous animals if a human were to fight one. And Ngannou is a very dangerous big human. One Ngannou against one gorilla, the gorilla is going to tear his face off. But how many Ngannous would it take to beat one gorilla? Cynophil Alec Walker thinks one Ngannou could beat 2 gorillas. I think it would probably take at least 6 Ngannous to successfully subdue a gorilla. I think it would. At least 6. I don't know if this has ever been tested. Because when humans have hunted gorillas, they've done it in large groups with weapons, with nets, with sedatives, things like that, to give themselves a massive unfair advantage. Jean-Tier says maybe 40 until the gorilla got tired. Getting tired would be the key because gorillas are extremely powerful, but they also tire out relatively quickly compared to a well-trained human athlete. So Ngannou is a guy who can just fight round after round after round at close to peak efficiency. A gorilla has like somewhere between half a minute to a minute of full power in it until it essentially gives up. So if you can get like, I would say maybe six Ngannous in there against one gorilla, one of them's probably going to die. He's going to take one for the team. He's going to tank all the damage while the other ones run in, come from the side and hold on to the limbs. And then maybe one comes in from behind and starts spiking in the back with elbows to the spine or something, or trying to strangle the thing. I don't know if a human could strangle a gorilla, to be honest. But after the gorilla tires out, killing the first Ngannou while the others are trying to subdue it, then maybe we'll need a backup team of like 2 more to come in after the 6 have tanked the damage of the initial onslaught, and then they can take out the tired gorilla after half a minute or a minute of fighting once the gorilla is worn out a little bit. Thanks, guys. Sends in a super chat with no comments or questions. Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Cinefil Alec Walker says, now how many Batmans does it take to beat a gorilla? Well, canonically, according to the comics, 1. Batman has not only fought gorillas before in the comics, he's fought a super gorilla in the comic and come out on top. Why? Because he's Batman. What's that gorilla supervillain called in the DC comics? I'm blanking on its name. He's fought Batman, he's fought the Flash, he's fought a bunch of DC superheroes. He's like a super intelligent, super powered gorilla. Grodd the gorilla, that's it, yeah. So, you know, on paper, Grodd should be able to just defeat Batman, both physically and on an intellectual level. So he's a very interesting villain for Batman because he's physically superior and he's a major intellect, arguably mentally superior too. And what makes a good villain is that they are more powerful than the hero. And so we are genuinely worried about the hero. How is he going to win? How is he going to succeed? I don't know if he can pull this off. It's going to take a genius stroke of writing to make this work. Striker775 says, but Grodd the gorilla has not learned that he can re-stomp Batman's groin. True. If Grodd would only take some lessons from Master Ken and learn some Ameradote, Batman would not stand a chance. After all, Batman is a master of like 57 different martial arts. Ameradote is not one of them. That's Batman's major weakness, canonically. We have a super chat from Hendrik, who says, Mr. Dewey, have you seen the Cuban Taekwondo champion recently signed to the UFC? I think he's big and athletic, but he's probably too old. I have not. Let's Google that. Cuban Taekwondo champion, UFC. Okay, so the UFC signs 6'7" Cuban Taekwondo medalist. Okay, dude, 6'7", 260 pounds. Who is he? What's his name? Robelis de España. However you say that, I'm not sure. Looks like. Let's take a look at this video. So it looks like this guy's done MMA fights before, so he's being touted as the Olympic Taekwondo medalist, but he is an MMA fighter. He has experience in MMA. So I'm watching just a clip from his fight, one of his fights. His opponent shot in on a low single, worked for an ankle pick. He threw some hammer fists to the back of the head. Zero Taekwondo in that clip, but, I mean, yeah. So, this is the first I've seen of it. He's big. He's athletic. He has MMA experience. Is he too old? The most common question I get on this channel is, am I too old for MMA? And it's most often asked to me by teenagers, teenage kids, teenagers. Am I too old for MMA? Your attitude is too old for MMA, if that's your attitude, man. So let's see more of this Robelis guy. So he's been signed to the UFC. Okay, I'm watching a couple more clips. He's scoring a TKO. via punches. Seems to be a competent puncher. Yeah, whenever there's like a Taekwondo guy in the UFC, somebody with a decorated Taekwondo background, we rarely see them do actual Taekwondo in their MMA fights. It's quite interesting. I remember Stephan Bonner. When he was on The Ultimate Fighter, he was often touted as the Taekwondo guy. He's a high-level Taekwondo black belt, and we barely even saw him throw a kick. And then when he fought John Jones was doing like 1,000% more Taekwondo than Stephan Bonner was. And John Jones was the wrestler. Funny how that happens. But yeah, we'll keep an eye out for that guy, see how he does in the UFC. Oh, we got a super chat from Nocturne who says, does karate effectively teach you how to fight? Well, I would say a large percentage of karate instructors do not effectively teach you how to fight. A small percentage of them do. So, how do you know which is which? This is the problem with being young and impressionable. The hardest thing in the world, technologically speaking, is to preserve and transmit information over long periods of time from one generation to the next. It really is. I wish I could just take out all my experiences and my knowledge and my skill and just stick that into your brains and you'd be like, whoa, I know Kung Fu, like that scene in The Matrix where Neo uploads Kung Fu directly into his brain. Unfortunately, we cannot. Somebody asked me today, what's the fastest way to learn MMA? What's the fastest way to learn how to fight? There is no fastest way to learn how to fight. It's a process, man. I wish there was a simple way to streamline it for everybody. There isn't. It's a process of trial and error. Now, when we rely on the experiences of those that have gone before, who have actually gone before, who are good at teaching and conveying that information, there's going to be less error in that trial and error part on our parts. If I ask you, how long does it take to earn a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt? Most of you will probably say about 10 years. And I will say, why? And you'll say, well, because it's a slow process. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot to learn. It takes a lot of mat hours to get that good. Sure, this is all true. But what about those guys who earned their black belt in 6 years, or 5 years, or 4 years? Those guys exist. Were they just special prodigies, or did they do something different? I think those guys aren't so much prodigies as they are evidence of the fact that it is possible to learn more faster. And it's definitely possible to completely retard your development and go a whole lot slower. And it has a lot to do with the way that you train, and it has a lot to do with how you approach your training. It has been said that the guy who consistently grinds it out and just logs the basic workouts is going to lap the guy who does the highlight reel once in a while. And there's a lot to say about that. But the guy who asks the right questions, because he's faced the limitations, and therefore he finds the right answers, is ultimately the guy who's going to go farther. All right, guys, I'm going to take one more question. Why are we talking about Spider-Man? Okay, you got my attention. Let's talk about Spider-Man. Dan says Spider-Man is absurdly OP. He's close to Thor strong and durable, super fast, and moves and thinks in a kind of enhanced timescale. Plus, he's got low-key precog powers telling him what you were doing. Okay, this is true, but why did we... Was somebody saying that Batman would beat Spider-Man in a fight? If so, you're dumb. No. I don't care how much you love Batman. Spider-Man is superior to Batman. Physically, tactically, and I would argue even mentally. As far as work ethic goes, Spider-Man has kind of a lazy work ethic. Spider-Man is like, he's really smart, he's really talented, he's got all these physical gifts, all of these superpowers which are amazing. And as Dr. Octopus pointed out in the Superior Spider-Man story arc when he took over Peter Parker's body, he was like, holy crap, Peter Parker has had all of this potential that he has been wasting because he's too damn lazy. He never finished his doctorate's degree. He didn't do this, he didn't do that. He's failing all his relationships. He had all of this untapped potential he could have been using. What the heck, man? Spider-Man in many ways was just kind of coasting by, doing the bare minimum, if you think about it. If you have a really smart guy, like a really smart guy, not just a book smart guy like Peter Parker is, like he's essentially a really smart scientist type of guy, but he's very much lacking in practical common sense in many ways. And a lot of people are like this. This is why I like the character of Spider-Man, because he's relatable. He's way out there in terms of powers and intellect and so on. But he's relatable because he's kind of dumb in ways that matter, in ways that real people like you and me can be dumb. And even smart people can be lazy. And we can justify not working harder. We can justify sleeping in. We can justify, I'll skip the gym today. We can justify all of these things that ultimately result in failure. Yeah, Gage MMA points out Spider-Man also made his own martial art called The Way of the Spider. Yeah. And that's part of the reason that Spider-Man, even though I love the character of Spider-Man, kind of sucks, because he's one of those dorks who made up his own martial art. Instead of putting in the bare minimum of effort to learn something like, say, Jiu-Jitsu, which in so many situations would have allowed him instant victory over so many of his foes, he comes up with his Way of the Spider nonsense, which really comes out to just scrambling around and throwing fisticuffs and dodging bullets and using 10 times the energy he really needs to. There was an issue of Ultimate Spider-Man. You know, that remake they did the mid early 2000s. And Spider-Man, he gets in a fight with some supervillain, then he's talking to Mary Jane. His Spider-Man costume, it's all torn up, and Mary Jane's helping him sew it back together, and he's got cuts and bruises. And he tells Mary Jane, maybe I should take like a jiu-jitsu class or something. And when I saw him say that, when I read that in the comics, I was like, yes. Spider-Man would be incredible if he would just like take a jiu-jitsu class, take a boxing class, take some basic rudimentary martial arts classes. Against normal humans, he doesn't need to. But against villains who are his power level or often greater, he would be an idiot not to. And Spider-Man is, as evidenced by his choices, he makes some idiotic decisions frequently. So in that sense, let's not be like Spider-Man. We often repeat Uncle Ben's mantra, with great power comes great responsibility. But that's kind of the thing with Spider-Man. He often shirks his responsibility. And he pays for it. And that's a recurring theme in the comics, and it's also played out in the movies quite a bit. And so he's constantly guilt-ridden. He's a very guilt-ridden character. So yeah, man. If Spider-Man actually knew martial arts, like if you took a character like, say, Captain America, who canonically is a hand-to-hand combat expert, he's one of the best hand-to-hand combatants in Marvel Comics, outside of, say, like Shang-Chi or Iron Fist. If you took, like, Captain America and gave him Spider-Man's powers, like, Spider-Man's powers are so many levels above Captain America's, he would be, oh man, he would be unstoppable. He would be, like, so far beyond Spider-Man, it wouldn't even be fair. Okay, we've talked about Spider-Man a lot. Pooped on Spider-Man, in spite of the fact that I love the character. Scott McGregor says, anyway, go to bed, Ramsey. You know what? I think I'll take your advice. I think I will. That's good advice. Thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.